5 bips including statutory levies. The cap is now reduced to 2 bips exclusive of levies. On AMC also, so far as the AUM slab-wise rates are there has also been adjustment. But broadly, we can say that the incidence remains the same, excluding and including, more or less, except for a couple of slabs. But main change is that 5 bips on exit load has been removed. The other point is the ease of compliance, rationalization of reporting requirements, elimination of duplicate filings, digital first disclosures, streamlined borrowing framework. And this is an important point, enabling borrowing by equity-oriented index funds and equity-oriented ETFs for execution-related needs, and clarifying the permissibility of intraday borrowing mechanisms to manage redemption-related timing mismatches. This was an important point which was brought to our notice by the industry, which has been redressed. The third important point which has been taken by the board today is in respect of certain amendments, certain requirements relating to public issue to enhance ease of doing business and increase the engagement and participation of retail investors. So the first of all is that this issue of how to focus retail investors as well as the others to focus on IPO's important points. IPO documents being DRHP, being very, very big documents, it's difficult for them to focus and know. So therefore, we wanted it to bring a focus, and consultation paper was that, okay, let's have a summary, offer document summary, and then that should be highlighted. Now, the board has, of course, taken a view that instead of that, we can have similar objective fulfilled through abridged prospectus. Because abridged prospectus is also a requirement under the law, under Section 33 of the Companies Act. With application, you have to give an abridged prospectus. So this is a legal requirement, so we cannot remove abridged prospectus. So what we say is the abridged prospectus, we have now said that this will be XYZ. Like we have created all important points which are required, and we have given that format that this abridged prospectus will be containing all these important points. And this will come, today this is not being offered at the draft stage. So we are saying that the draft stage also, when you have a DRHP, at that stage also there will be a draft abridged prospectus, which exactly will bring everything together, and it will be available with a QR code, so that, and this was one of the suggestions from public feedback, so that all the public announcements related to that IPO will get that QR code so that the people can easily access that abridged prospectus, which will now get all the information which your eyeballs need quickly. And idea is that the people are able to read through they are not able to read through the voluminous IPO thing, but still we need people who are doing a lot of research. For them, I think we need to give everything. But for the people who quickly want to really assess all the relevant information, we have indicated that it should be placed in the abridged and with a QR code, so it can be easily done. So the only change is from the document which was sent for public consultation and today is that there we wanted the summary to be highlighted and abridged to go. Here we are saying that let the abridged will be retained and it will come at the draft stage itself. And then I think in consultation with Ministry of the Corporate Affairs, we can change that, and offer document summary can be removed from there so that not to be repetitive. I hope it is clarified, but I will also clarify you while you are taking questions. Then the next, I think there was one more thing in this. There was a very important, enabler now to bring in an automatic lock-in for the pre-issue capital. So there are shareholders, there are promoters whose shares are locked in for 6 months, but there is also a requirement that those who are even not non-promoters, their shares also will be locked in for 6 months. The problem happens that if the things are pledged, then how the pledge will work. And that was leading to many of the companies not being able to get that clearance from those shareholders, those who have pledged it, so that these lock-in requirements could be filled up. So we are making a provisions in the changes in the ICDR, and based on that, there will be a possibility that directly the depositories can do the work, and pledged work can release of or taking off the pledge will automatically lock-in will be possible through the depositories. So these are the two proposals relating to which will have impact on commission or the brokerage. But if the issuers want to give certain facilities, certain discounts, that's not permissible. So we are, in order to promote retail buying for the bonds or the securities, the non-convertible securities, we are making the amendments to make it possible for the additional interest or a discount to the issue price to be given to certain category of allottees. For example, senior citizens, women, armed forces personnel, namely serving and retired defense personnel, and widows and widowers of such personnel, retail individual investors, or any other category of investors as may be specified by the board from time to time. So this will enable something which is already possible under the equity segment to also be possible for the segment on the debt side, non-convertible securities. The next item is relating to Regulation 39 and 40 of the Listing Obligation and Disclosure Requirements Regulations. The basic thing is in removal of, the first is 39, in which we are now bringing in a simplified way in which the physical, in which the transfer deeds executed before 1/4/2019 could be dematted. Now, as you know, after 1/4/2019, no transfer is possible other than demat. But if the physical securities were there and transfer was there, there was a up to 2021. It could have been, it was possible to lodge it and then get it converted. Now, some of the difficulties have been faced, and those difficulties are being addressed in these regulations. So before 1/4/2019, if you have lodged the claims and if you have, it was in one case something rejected or returned earlier, then we have given already a special window has been opened from July 7, 2025 to January 6, 2026 to allow relodgement of transfer deeds which were executed and lodged prior to the deadline of April 1, 2019. However, if we also have some cases where transfer deeds were done before 1/4/2019, but they could not lodge it before the time 2021 which was given. So therefore, we are opening this window for them in order to come in and lodge it. Please note that it is a pre-1/4/2019 transfer that we are talking about. Post that, transfers in physical securities are not allowed. The next is the aligning the timeline for transfer of unclaimed amount by an entity having listed non-convertible securities with Companies Act. So this is where, as you know, that there is an Investor Education and Protection Fund, IEPF, and investor, then it is also there at Ministry of Corporate Affairs. It's also available with the SEBI. So in case of companies, any unclaimed amount of maturity and interest has to go to, after 7 years, has to go to that fund. There was inconsistency that here there is a debt, for debt securities there is a principal and there is also an interest. So interest is accrued over a period in several tranches. And the 7 years timeline was to be, as per the rules of the IIF, was coming from 7 years from maturity. So this was not very clear. This is being aligned so that there is no confusion. This will also enable many people to claim interest from the issuer itself, because there is generally a little more difficulty in getting that from the IEPF. That's a separate set of rules. So now it will go, the accrued interest which is there, it will go to an escrow whenever it is to be paid. If not paid, 30 days. Within 7 days, it goes to escrow. But it doesn't immediately after 7 years go for that. It waits till the maturity. From the maturity, it goes 7 years. The matured principal plus all the interest which is there together can go. Until that time, it remains in an escrow with the issuer, which means that the claim would be possible from the issuer as and when the people are able to track it and trace it. So generally, due to various reasons, the interest is, people are not able to get the interest. It may be change of address. It may be they would have shifted locations. They may not be aware.
मैडम सपने स्किप नहीं सिप करो सिंपली विजिट kotakmf.com/MrSIP और सीखो SIP।
Then the next decision was relating to the regulation of activities of credit rating agencies. So the credit rating agencies, which are regulated by SEBI, can also fall under the purview of other financial sector regulator. They may be, for example, rating loans, etc., which is a purview of RBI. They may also be doing some work relating to, say, unlisted securities, which is not really being in the purview of SEBI. So there was a difficulty faced by the industry in terms of not being able to because of our provisions, which said that they can do so only if there is a guideline by the concerned financial sector regulator. Now, in absence of a guideline, they could not have done it. There are in many areas where there are no guidelines from that concerned regulator, which means they were not able to do it. So we are making it now clear to enable them to take up such activities, but making it very clear that what would be the disclaimers and conditions which will lie, which means that basically they'll segregate certain business processes in a manner where investment protection and other benefits of SEBI will not be available in relation to non-SEBI regulated activities that they do, and they have to make it explicit. They also have to intimate, they have to have a separate email IDs, etc. for those clients, and subject to that, they can actually take up those activities. So this is something which is an important area in which they can do, and that will also be good for the economy, because in many cases there would be unlisted entities also for listed players also. There could be subsidiaries. So in which case they normally rating when it is done, it's also done on a company on issuer and consolidated basis, including subsidiaries, including unlisted entities also, which was a difficulty so far as they were concerned, that our regulations were in a way preventing them from doing so. So we are removing that. It's an ease of doing business measure, subject to, of course, the due risk mitigation which they will do. Like if they have to take up additional net worth would be required if certain other regulator says so. So that will not be merged with this net worth. So there are certain safeguard measures. Subject to that safeguards, they can do that. The next item was relating to high value debt listed entities. As you know, HVDLEs, they are the ones who have been classified today with an outstanding, of non-convertible debt of 1,000 crore or more. Now, this limit is actually very low in relation to the debts that many of the entities raise, for example, NBFCs, etc. So there is a constraint on them. So that's being raised to 5,000 crore. And so this is an ease of doing business. What happens with the HVDLEs is the additional corporate governance requirements. And those corporate governance requirements would be extra costs also to them. And obviously more onerous measures, and will dissuade them otherwise to do that. So that is one set of proposal. The second set of proposal is to make those corporate governance measures consistent with what is obtaining on the equity side. Because what has happened is that last few boards, we have relaxed those requirements there on the equity side. But consistently, we have not done it here. So we are aligning it with that. So if for example, if you have a issuer who is also on the equity as well as on the debt, there's a consistent provision should apply instead of. So we have basically harmonized it with whatever ease which we have given it. For example, RPTs, whatever scale-based RPTs we have applied there, we are also applying it there. So this is basically kind of a catch-up and harmonization. The other is raising the threshold from 1,000 to 5,000 with a view to further enabling this sector to raise the debt easily. The last important proposal was relating to the high-level committee on conflict of interest. So the board deliberated on this matter, and and acknowledged that there is a comprehensive review which has been carried out by HLC, and expressed that we need to have a detailed discussion on the recommendations in the ensuing meeting, keeping in view public and media comments, certain concerns expressed by employees, operational modalities, and the way forward. So thank you friends.
Hi, sir. Sir, Ankur Mishra from ET Now. First of all, congratulations on the overhaul of the two major regulations that you mentioned. First, on the stockbrokers regulation, what I have noticed, apart from the reduction in the paras and the total length, you have fixed the responsibility on stock exchanges. Is there any other change which happens after this?
No, it is basically to make it clear that it is for the stock exchanges which have to be the first line of regulator. And many of the things, they have to come through the stock exchanges, not directly. So that is the point which has been made clear.
Also on the mutual fund regulations, is there any timeline of implementation as well which has been kept in mind?
Mutual fund will be 1st April onwards, and because now it will take.
What am I training for? To be the fittest version of myself. And for that, I put in everything I have. 100%. And zero of what my body doesn't need. That's why I choose the best. Like my Isopure. It has 100% whey protein isolate and zero carbs, fat and sugar. Isopure. Everything you need, nothing you don't.
And that was the presentation that came from the mutual fund industry stakeholders. Second thing, one constant understanding that we get from mutual fund is that they say that the difference between a smaller fund, a newer fund, younger fund versus an older fund and a bigger fund is very steep. And the thinking is that since something is doing very well, it means that it's been accepted very well. But lower TKR is there on that one. It should be the other way around, and at least the steepness should reduce. What is SEBI's view on that particular aspect?
I think the telescopic way of doing things is more friendly to investors, and they should continue, because if you are able to have a larger AUM and you have bulk, obviously you are able to meet with some cost more effectively because it's a percentage. So the telescopic, I think, is a well-established thing, and it should continue, and we have to look at the investors.
So on the same mutual fund, you have changed from TER to BER now. What goes behind the name change? It is something like base rate which we used to have in banking system. Something like that over and above it can be charged depending on the scenario.
Yes, the point is that all these charges will be visible, because when one can say that you have everything clubbed is much better for me. कि मुझे आप एक बताइए बस कितना, इतने सारी चीज़ें कि नहीं है. लेकिन जब आप कॉम्पोजिशन में जाते हैं तो उसमें भी काफ़ी क्लैरिटी मिलती है, डेटा मिलता है कि कौन कितना है, और उसके बाद कल आप यदि मान लो टैक्स बढ़ गया या कम हो गया, उसमें हम फिर TER में फिर बार बार एडजस्टमेंट करते रहेंगे. तो जब आपने देखा होगा इन्वॉइसिंग भी होती है, पहले जब भी इन्वॉइसिंग वगैरह होती थी बहुत सारे कॉन्ट्रैक्ट वो डिस्प्यूट्स पे चले जाते थे, जब वो कहते थे कि आप इसको ऑल इंक्लूसिव बताइए, इंक्लूसिव ऑफ टैक्सेस बताइए. तो इंक्लूसिव ऑफ टैक्सेस में इंसिडेंस क्लियर नहीं होती, कस्टमर को भी क्लियर नहीं होती. तो इसीलिए आपको ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा जो कॉन्ट्रैक्ट्स होते हैं वो दिस प्लस GST होगा, क्योंकि जो पास ऑन होते हैं टैक्सेस, दो तरह के टैक्सेस होते हैं. एक डायरेक्ट टैक्सेस होता है जो पास नहीं होता, जो इनडायरेक्ट टैक्सेस होता है जो कस्टमर्स को पास होता है, वो विजिबली दिखना चाहिए. तो अदरवाइज नहीं तो क्लैरिटी नहीं होगी आपको कि एंड देन देयर विल बी आल्सो पॉसिबिलिटी ऑफ फजिंग थिंग्स.
So just one follow-up to that.
So,
can we assume that now the BER has been fixed as far as the floor of it is concerned, and any changes going forward?
It is not the floor, it is a cap.
It is a cap, sir.
So therefore, let me make it very clear. When we say this is the caps, which means the maximum, so which means that you can, industry is competitive, you can still offer lower. Like if you want to attract the people to your mutual fund, you can even offer lower than this, if you can afford it. If you suppose you do the cost saving, you do technology, if you can do that, you can offer. So this is caps.
So this will be on new SIPs after April 1st, or will it apply to the existing ones also?
No, it will, everyone will be.
Okay. So when in the consultation paper for cash market, it was much lower for both markets, and now it is, you've increased. What did you hear from the industry participants that pushed this decision?
No, I didn't get it.
No, the brokerage...
Cost increases or decreases for an investor with the BER. The entry cost increases for an investor, or it comes down with the BER?
No, obviously, I mean, which one are you talking?
The BER, with the introduction of BER.
Yeah, so even
customer
if you...
benefits or...
Yeah, even if you say the BER is now more transparent by excluding the taxes and putting it separately, and incidence, suppose more or less remain the same in that slab. In one or two, there is a slight changes also, but broadly it is the same. The exit load completely goes, 5 bips.
So,
Sir, will mutual funds, AMCs, will their profitability be impacted by these changes? Have you looked at that? Because shares of AMCs that corrected after the proposal was first floated. And have you analyzed as to how much, whether their profitability will be impacted?
We have heard all sides subsequent to the proposal. And now our present proposal is a balanced version. It is not, I would say, as radical as it was proposed in the thing, because of several facts which have been brought to our several data which have been given to us. So therefore, for example, on the brokerage side, it was very clearly brought to our notice that the sell side research is a bundled cost. And if we were trying to propose that they can unbundle it and they can actually pay brokerage at a lower level and pay for research separately, that model a business model is not available, number one, today. And wherever it has been tried, for example, it has been tried in MiFID in Europe and UK, it was not found to be successful, which led to decline in the sell side research, which is not in the interest of either investors in general, because a lot of broadcasting they do, if they stop covering those stocks, then everyone will be a loser. Not only the people who buy their brokerage, even otherwise. Because many of the retail investors who are independently investing, they have a source of knowledge about the stocks which are covered by others, which are broadcast. So therefore, taking into consideration, we find that there is a different type of, for example, arbitrage funds, there is a smaller brokerage possible because there the research is not as important. But in many areas, research is important. So therefore, a balanced view was taken, also based on certain data, which was presented by the industry to us, as to what kind of thing will be reasonable to be done.
So this looks like a better deal for the industry than they had hoped for. But moving a little away from today's proposals, one or two broad brush questions. One is, in the recent months, in fact for more than a year now, one of the things that is in conversation in capital markets is how a large chunk of the IPOs are coming in the form of OFS and not fresh capital issuances. And there is a lot of debate about whether this really forms capital or not, etc. First of all, as SEBI, how do you look at this issue? Is this issue even under deliberation? Is there a possibility that down the line we might consider some kind of a capping of OFS, a certain proportion be thought about? So what is your general thinking? Two other questions. One is, in a recent high-profile issue, there was protest by some of the investors in anchor allocation. And there are two issues out here. Of course, it's a perennial issue for many, many years that, anchors allocation is always subject to the discretion of brokers and the selling shareholder, etc. But one of the issues that a lot of funds highlight is that a lot of funds come into anchor allocation at the strike price, which is not really the role of an anchor. The idea of an anchor is essentially to enable price discovery, where you independently judge an issue and put a price tag to it. And that's not something like, most of the funds that are coming in are actually not, are essentially executing at strike price and not really playing the role of an anchor. So is this a feedback that has come to you, and what is your thinking around it? And a third thing is, recently a circular was sent to the mutual fund industry that the pre-IPOs allocations will be disallowed. So some of the funds that have been investing in pre-IPOs argue that the circular argued that because pre-IPOs tend to be illiquid, and the idea is to ensure that liquidity in public funds be maintained, these are disallowed. But the understanding is that... Sorry, just 3 seconds.
I'm just keeping loose track of the questions.
Sorry, I'll wind up this thing.
I think this is what happens to what is called opportunistic behavior. When you say, you will ask a question, one question, then you will say one, part A, part B, part C, part D. So I'm not able to grasp it, and we can probably...
Just the first 2 questions.
So, okay, the first question is on the IPO. I will just draw your attention to, the way money is fungible. So, money can come in first, come in later, come different ways. Now, how do you think that someone will raise capital always? A first timer, for example, if he were to go as a greenfield, and if he goes in there and he claims that, okay, we want to do it, a big thing, and I want to form a company, capital formation, so I am seeking money for that company. So how do you think that he will do, and what will be their response? Unless you have built in a lot of your own past credibility. Like XYZ, who has done many companies, he wants to do a fresh company, people will probably, because they look at certain records. So therefore, when does the money come first? When you are trying to raise equity. So in many cases, people will give you the money at a certain stage of your credibility being established. And how do you bring the credibility? First, you raise money from friends, relatives, your own capital. You start maybe as a private limited company. You may then take certain debts, maybe if suppose some AIF, etc. want to, then maybe some private equity wants to help, and you can do that. So you have to really prove your credentials to many, raise money, and then build up certain company. Then build up certain assets, maybe build up certain turnover, maybe build up certain brand. And then you say, okay, now I want to come in there. Then you can come in 2 ways. You can say that, well, I would like to, raise more capital. I want to expand. So in that case, you will say, oh, he's raising money only for the company. Or he might say, if he has already, a lot of people have already put the money, they might say, now you are big enough. I would also like to sell certain shares and, exit, maybe partly, maybe fully. Some of them, those who helped the company at the initial stages of it being private, right? So how does it make a difference? Money comes first or money comes later? So this particular debate has to be looked at in the context of capital formation. Capital formation will have different models. There is no one single model that only this is the way only the thing will come. So is it that we should, India in its present, we are aspiring to be a $5 trillion economy. Is it in our case that someone will be able to judge here and say, this is the way you have to raise capital? I think we have well past gone that stage. India is very, very mature. They are able to, you have different kinds of investors, you have different kind of people, and they take the judge. Our case as a regulator is enabling different types of risk capital coming into different risk areas and have investor protection, do investor protection in terms of very good disclosures. And in terms of loss-making companies, we do have a reservation which is different, which is not 30%, which is actually much less, which is 10%, deliberately. Because we know that, whether they will be able to understand revenue multiples or whether you will EBITDA multiples, the profits not being there. So given that, do you think that we should be intervening in every case of that, and in how many cases based on some listing gain, some company has made a listing gain, someone has a listing loss. That listing loss has been recovered after 4 days. Then which one day? Is it a listing day so important? So what is it that we are doing? Is the job of a capital formation is to say who makes the listing well that particular day, one day in the history of the company, in the whole journey of the company? So because since you are financial press, I think you do really understand how the capital moves, and the capital should be allowed to move, and it should be, different allocation of risk should be there. And we should say that riskier segment should have maybe a different thing. For example, our AIF industry, we said AI only, where we say accredited investors will have a much more capacity to take risk than others. So this is the model that we follow. If we find that there is an egregious nature of violations, then we come in. But should we really impose any one particular model? I'm just leaving that question on to you instead of answering.
So may I add to on that, on the anchor investor part in.
You can see it as a highway with two lanes. One is the private market, and one is the public market. And luckily, we are the exception in the world where we are doing well on both the lanes. And the private market has to somewhere merge with the public market. That's where the IPO takes place. So we are doing well, and I think capital formation is happening on both the lanes.
And just to add, when we say that India should be a good place for investment, if there is no easy exit, then the investment will also suffer. We know we want to promote startups, we want to promote entrepreneurship in India, we want entrepreneurs to take risk and build companies, and risk capital to come in from other investors. There has to be an exit route also. Otherwise, they will not invest. The entire ecosystem will suffer.
So, but the CEA had said that the process of investor exits is rather than growth capital, it undermines the...
I replied it the same day in the same conference. You can see my...
So just adding on to just two questions on the same. In a public address last month, that is on last...
Okay, I will just answer that. See, we follow disclosure-based regime and we do not interfere in commercial decisions. Now company... So we follow disclosure-based regime. So, and for that purpose, investor has to be enabled, strengthened. We need to spend on their education, which initiative SEBI is taking, and there are other proposals in the pipeline. How do we increase investor awareness? How do we spend more on education?
I was dealing with back pain every day. My old mattress has no support, and honestly, my back pain has gotten even worse.
So, I upgraded to the Sleep Company mattress, जो कि है इंडिया का first and only smart grid technology mattress. Smart grid मुझे देता है soft comfort और firm back support, ताकि मेरी back पूरे दिन aligned रहे. The mattress also has SnowTech cooling fabric that keeps it 4 to 6 degrees cooler. Cool, comfy, and perfectly supportive. It's like sleeping on a cloud. You also get a 10-year warranty and 100-night trial. If it doesn't work for you, which I doubt, you can return it. No questions asked. Search for the Sleep Company online and find your nearest store now.
It is a commercial decision of the company to whom it allocates. And about your strike price and negotiated, what we do understand, the lot of negotiation takes place at the time of anchor allocation, at what price it will be allocated. So, once again, the same thing. We follow disclosure-based regime. So long as these things are happening in a fair and transparent manner, we are happy with it. If there is anything, like the Chairman Sir said, egregious violation or anything, then we will definitely enter into the picture.
So just two questions.
And
one
just
from
for FI, that means last year, OFS component was 51%, and April to October this year, it was 57%. So to say that something exceptional has happened is also not met with facts.
So one from the board decisions today, or rather something that has been deferred, on the discussions around the recommendations by the high-level committee. So obviously the employees of the SEBI and the board must have raised certain concerns on those recommendations also. That is why we are going to take certain discussions forward. And this was one of the earliest announcements that you had done. So just two parts on this. First, on what kind of concerns are there on those recommendations, and what kind of timeline are you looking at now once you complete 1 year at SEBI, or when can we see this code of thing being implemented? And second part on the anchor investment, Varshney sir in a public address last month had mentioned that there is a case to see for SEBI to see if anchor allotments or anchor investors are pricing the IPOs fairly or not. Obviously, we understand on the disclosure part and fair and everything, but as you mentioned that there was a case for SEBI to consider it and to look into it. So has there been any introspection on that part of?
I'll just clarify. So I had said that this is a current policy. If you see the exact words that I had used, that the current policy where we do not interfere in pricing is the correct policy, and we don't want to change it. But if there is any concern, then one can examine whether there is need to put some guardrails. Once again, that when I use the word guardrail, it is once again related to that transparency, that if there is some compromise on transparency or fairness, we can examine whether we need to put some guardrail, but we do not want to deviate from our policy of disclosure-based regime.
Okay, sure, sir.
So I think it's an important question, how can we also improve disclosure further? And today the board has decided, as you know, there's the whole abridged focus, and you will see in that content, we are bringing it very clearly that within the last year, anybody who has purchased at what price will be clearly mentioned there, pre-IPO deals. Then within the last 3 years, on the volume weighted basis, weighted cost of the equity, that also will be brought in. So these facts will be visible to everyone straight away. You don't have to read through the documents to do that, which means that again, people can raise these issues if you find that there are unreasonable ground of valuing it too much higher than that. The idea is that, whenever something is disclosure is done in a proper manner and there is a greater debate and discussion, then the people can take a call whether to subscribe or not. See, the question is that, people can take a call that I would not subscribe to this issue. That is a whole task of public issue. It's not that, everyone has to do it. You have to take your call. And Indian markets have to mature towards that. Indian investors have to mature that and not really typically go with herd mentality, because that is how the capitalism or the free market will function, that there will be different people and there will be a greater analysis, there will be a research, there will be a debate, there will be media thing, and do that. But it is basically, it should be more informed decision making. That's what we are this thing. And
one more thing on that particular statement that you have quoted. What I had said there, valuation takes place in 2 occasions. One is IPO and one is corporate arrangements. In corporate arrangement, NSE looks into valuation and SEBI also looks into valuation. So there we follow a regime where we can interfere if the valuation is not proper, and it is for further thought, further discussion, whether, I had said that along with IBBI, we might work to see if some valuation norms can be provided in corporate arrangements. So that is not for IPOs.
सर हिंदी में आपसे जानना चाहेंगे एक जो नया इन्वेस्टर होगा या एक इन्वेस्टर होगा,
मैं पहले इनका जवाब दे देता हूँ HLC पे।
जो नए रूल्स आए हुए हैं,
so the issue is that there are important considerations there, recommendations. One part relating to conflict part. So there is a fair amount of that we should implement that framework, the automation and the way it is done and all that. The other part is a public disclosure. So public disclosure being suggested in terms of, I think, some of the assets, liabilities of certain category of employees. And so there is some privacy concerns there, that we are prepared to give it internally to someone, whosoever is mandated to do it. But in fact, they are doing it already, except that, certain way it can be improved or whatever. But making it public on something which is there. Now, there is a immovable there is a movable there. Again, there is something is more like changing on a day-to-day basis, like liquid assets. And the other one is the immovable assets. So there is also, so one has to take a view how we would match whatever the concerns that is there, also with the requirement of greater transparency in terms of our personal details.
Sir, I have one question. I mean, you've discussed about the IPO bit, but when the companies this year, which are getting listed, a lot of them are overvalued, and and just before the IPO, if you see 1 year, then there have been immense profits shown in, and then probably they get overvalued. You can just tell me if there's something. Now the mutual fund companies which have surplus, because they're resilient domestic flows, every month they're increasing. So they have surplus to always invest, and sometimes they have to invest in companies which probably could be overvalued. So if the retailers' money is going into certain overvalued companies, how are you looking at this whole situation? I mean, you've answered quite
I
a
think
bit
you are basically, I think, starting with something which you believe in. First is that if it is a company is overvalued, please, you have to state that fact. You have to discuss why it is overvalued. Why do you think a particular company is overvalued? So everyone is free to discuss in detail. Volume of information is there in that. So the people then have to debate, we consider it overvalued because of that. Some people do it, and that's the whole purpose. But we cannot actually give a generalization like that.
Sir, if I were to extend that question, I mean, this year is a record year for IPOs, and we have seen the post-listing performance is not as good as it was there last year. So I know while SEBI doesn't want to get into pricing, but at the same time it has to ensure that, the scorecard looks okay, because then this whole momentum sustains. So as a regulator, what can you do to, ensure that good quality companies come to the market, pricing-wise also, the post-listing experience is good for investors? Is there anything that SEBI can do here?
Chairperson, sir, just in addition to that question, you maintain that everything that happens in the Indian market would be disclosure-based, and one of the testimony of that is the DRHP document, that every detail has to be disclosed for a company to go ahead. Do you think somewhere there are elements which are emerging, which under the point of disclosing everything, are going ahead with some very extreme things? Very recently, not to name a company, in those 75 risk pointers, one of the risks says for 3 years a company, the balance sheet which it has given to its lenders does not match the balance sheet which it has given to the DRHP, FY 23-24-25. Now, it's disclosed, but to do something of that sort, it is quite extreme, right, under disclosure. And the DRHP is being filed.
I think I will not like to comment on individual cases. You are suddenly there. neither I have the data, but I am not inclined to respond to this general observation that the post-listing performance has been bad or whatever. The data really doesn't show. So it doesn't show because you have to, if you have to compare with what? Compare with on an average, 6 years, 7 years, or what is can you just compare something? So I don't want to get into that issue. Presently, the thing is that our stance is that the markets are there, markets are free, people should choose, and there should be a greater information, there should be a greater education also. There should be a greater education where to come in and where to know. For example, derivative markets, so many people are coming, and we are dissuading, we are even giving a statutory warning signal, please don't come.
Sir,
Sir, please allow others also to ask questions.
हिंदी का आप बताइए.
सर सर ये बदले हुए जो रूल्स एंड रेगुलेशंस हैं एक इन्वेस्टर को किस तरीके से इसका फ़ायदा होगा, साथ ही जो फर्स्ट टाइम इन्वेस्टर है, न्यू इन्वेस्टर है, किस तरीके से वो प्रोटेक्टेड फील होगा, एंड हाउ सून कैन वी सी द चेंजेस ऑन द सिस्टम?
नहीं, किस बात पे?
ये जो आपने रूल्स चेंज किए हुए हैं म्यूचुअल फंड्स के.
म्यूचुअल फंड का तो मैंने जैसे बताया कि हमारा जो कुछ कॉस्ट रिडक्शन हो रहा है इसमें, एक तो 5 BPS का जो एग्जिट लोड है वो रिमूव हो रहा है 1 अप्रैल से. दूसरा, हमें चूँकि स्ट्रक्चर हम चेंज कर रहे हैं और टैक्सेस और लेवीज़ को अलग से दिखा रहे हैं, तो उनमें यदि प्लस माइनस होता है तो ओवरऑल TER में यदि हम पूरा क्लब कर देते तो उसमें कोई चेंज नहीं हो पाता. फिर इसमें चेंज पॉसिबल है यदि आपको कुछ मतलब रिडक्शन है टैक्सेस में, और यदि इंक्रीज़ है तो इंक्रीज़ भी रिफ्लेक्ट होगा, बट वो क्लियरली विजिबल होगा, क्योंकि वो जो अमाउंट है वो AMCs को नहीं जाएगा, मतलब इन्वेस्टर को वो पास ऑन हो सकता है. तो एक वो बात कर रहे हैं. थर्ड, ब्रोकरेज में भी हमारा जो मतलब वो है वो भी कम हुआ है, जो उसकी हमारी कैप है. तो दोनों तरफ से, क्योंकि ब्रोकर बेस प्लस ब्रोकरेज, तो जो कैप के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से हम देखा जाए तो हमारा इन्वेस्टर्स को उसका फ़ायदा हो रहा है. और दूसरी तरफ से जो इंडस्ट्री को हम कर रहे हैं उसमें बहुत सारी हम रैशनलाइजेशन मेजर दे रहे हैं. दूसरा, जिस एक्सटेंट से हम रिडक्शन चाह रहे थे उतनी एक्सटेंट ऑफ रिडक्शन इसमें नहीं हुई है. तो बोथ ऑन द ब्रोकरेज साइड ऑल्सो ऑन द अदर साइड. तो ये प्रपोजल दोनों चीज़ों को बैलेंस करता हुआ दिखाई देता है.
Sir, I wanted to ask you on this 4th proposal, permitting debt issuers to offer incentives in public issues to certain category of investors. So there was this concern raised by few people in the market that it shouldn't be that someone with a very bad rating, goes out there and offers incentives to certain investors to lure them towards, buying into their product. This is in the light of what has happened, the mis-selling of 81 bond, to investors. So how is SEBI looking at ensuring that this is not misused?
No, there is no misuse. Number one is one time, is given to a very small number of people, and we are talking of a market which is actually currently there is non-existent so far as retail is concerned. Please understand, the equity market and the bond market are completely different. The equity market, you have now increasingly a very heavy, participation, because over a period of time, equity culture has developed in India, and therefore retail investors, millions of them, they participate. Mutual funds also they give, and through them they participate. In the debt side, it is basically the institutional market more or less. It is over-the-counter market. 99% of all your debt placements are over-the-counter. Large issuers are there, and so therefore this is something which is completely, I would say, very, very nascent. And so therefore we have to take a number of steps, and this is just a very small steps There are to be number of steps to be done in order to bring the bonds, the fixed income market, to also to the retail investors, which also means as education, because they have much better understanding of equity and very little understanding of bond market, how do they do. Then there is a secondary market issues, how do we really get it traded. If you want to exit, you don't have to hold to maturity. If you want to exit, how quickly you can come in. We therefore brought in the OBPP platforms, bond platforms, where it is possible for you to actually buy bonds at the retail level, even if at 10,000 rupees, and then also able to sell it. We also brought in put options while the people are issuing it, so that something can be bought back by the issuer, and there have not been many takers yet. So this is one market where we are very, very far away from any possible misuse that you are talking about. In fact, in many of the fixed income instrument, precisely for these categories, you already have a higher interest rate, for example, available for senior citizen. You do have, special benefits. So our things are not very inconsistent with that.
So you're streamlining the borrowing framework for ETFs, equity ETFs, to allow borrowing for execution-related needs. Is that something the industry actively wanted, and do you expect any impact in terms of better execution and hence lower?
I will ask Amarjit to clarify this.
Yeah, just to complete the question. So lower tracking error. And another part of this is that a lot of investors face this issue where the pricing in the secondary market for an ETF and the actual NAV of the ETF, there seems to be a wide gap in many cases between both. Is SEBI looking to address that in any way, improve market maker activity in these ETFs?
Get 72 hours of unstoppable moisturization. New Nivea Body Milk. अब 100% प्योर हाइलुरोनिक एसिड के साथ जो मॉइस्चर लॉक करे longer than ever, पूरे 72 hours. मतलब healthy looking skin and confident looking you.
If I can also add that going forward, if we bring in closing auction mechanism for institutional players, so mainly for FPIs and mutual funds, then you need this kind of flexibility in the system where they are able to borrow. So that is one reason why we've enabled it, and we will implement it going forward.
What's the impact? Do you see a better execution and hence lower tracking error for some?
Yes, that is precisely the objective.
And precisely the object, but also, the execution of trades when you are doing balancing and suddenly you are short of cash, but your cash is lying with the banks, but only it is coming to you at 4 o'clock and you need it at 11 o'clock, but your cash is there. So there is no risk actually. Only that you should be able to just, so it is like an enabling provision where you are able to execute it properly without really scrambling.
And on the gap between secondary market prices for ETFs and NAVs being out of whack many a times, how is SEBI viewing that? Any regulation coming to help that?
I think that is a big issue, but we can look at the data before I respond to that.
So nothing in the works? Right?
Yeah, nothing in the works immediately. Yeah.
दो और रेगुलेशन की बात हमने की है, एक सेटलमेंट रेगुलेशंस की और एक LODR की, और SAST regulations also we will look at.
Just one, usually this one question is always asked at all press conferences on the influencer part, and there's recently seen very strict actions being taken recently, and some other countries have started asking for certification of financial influencers or certain other such influencers, that they are credible enough to give that advice. Any further thinking we have already put in place on how influencers should act on education and other fronts, but any other further thinking on how it has to be curbed or looked into?
I think there is a lot of action needed. Rather than simply thinking is not required, action is also needed. So I think action will be continuous.
Sir, on the subject of, in August you said there's a regulation, some form of regulation for pre-IPO shares that was under pilot project under consideration. Any update on that?
I think we are looking at it. We are looking at different provisions and at appropriate time we'll let you know how we proceed on that.
So sir, what you're looking at, is it what falls under SEBI's purview and what doesn't, because pre-IPO is something
That's right.
not a listed security. So is that what you're looking at?
That's right.
So on the CST part that you mentioned, that is also under consideration. Sir, there was a takeover panel which was created, but the report hasn't really gone anywhere. Is it the report which is under consideration, or is a complete relook of the?
So based on the report, we are looking at the report, and based on the report, we will then, put forward our proposals.
सर यहाँ प्रेस रिलीज में हम देख रहे हैं कि जहाँ कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट की बात है वहाँ लिखा हुआ है सर्टेन कंसर्न्स एक्सप्रेस बाय एम्प्लॉयज़। ये हाई लेवल कमेटी बनी थी ताकि लोगों का जो भी न्यूज़ आई थी, खबरें आई थी, ताकि इस संस्था में फिर से लोगों का विश्वास उतना ही गहरा हो जितना पहले था और रहेगा भी। तो यहाँ पर किस तरह से किस तरह के कंसर्न्स एक्सप्रेस किए गए हैं, क्योंकि जो सुझाव थे वो नवंबर के महीने में आए थे, तो एक्सपेक्टेड था कि शायद अभी इसमें कुछ और ज़्यादा क्लैरिटी आएगी और कोई ना कोई एक ढांचा जो है बन जाएगा जिसपे सब उसी ढांचे के अनुसार डिस्क्लोजर्स देंगे अपने।
जैसे मैंने बताया कि पब्लिक डिस्क्लोजर पे बात मतलब कंसर्न है कि जैसे वही चीज़, तो क्या पब्लिक डिस्क्लोजर ऑफ पर्टिकुलरली आपकी अपनी एसेट्स और लायबिलिटीज़ का प्राइवेसी के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से क्या उसको जागर करना ज़रूरी है क्या, ये कंसर्न है।
तो कब हम इसको नेक्स्ट बोर्ड मीटिंग में वो,
और दूसरा ये भी कंसर्न है कि उसमें कुछ हैं कि जो आपके जो स्पाउस हैं यदि वो अपने ही मतलब रिसोर्सेज से करते हैं, ट्रेड करते हैं, तो क्या हम उनको रोक सकते हैं क्या करना।
तो ये नेक्स्ट मीटिंग में इसका हम एक स्केलेटन या रूल जो भी है आप इसको बोलें कि जो भी रिपोर्ट आई थी उसके ऊपर फिक्स
मतलब जो भी पॉइंट्स हैं उसके बारे में विचार विमर्श और अधिक होने की ज़रूरत।
थैंक यू सर।
अगर यूपीएसआर उनके पास एक्सेस है तो उनको डिस्क्लोज करना पड़ता है।
वो तो लगेगा, वो तो है, अभी तो है, क्योंकि वो इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग हैं, जो भी हैं वो इनसाइडर माने जाते हैं। तो सेबी के एम्प्लॉयज़ को ऐसा नहीं है कि वो इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग नहीं लगता है। ये भी उनका कहना है कि हम इनसाइडर ट्रेडिंग तो आते ही हैं, फिर हमें क्यों, हमारे स्पाउस को क्यों रोका जाए। मतलब कुछ पॉइंट्स हैं जिसको कि देखने की ज़रूरत है। और डीपीडीपी एक्ट भी है, डेटा प्रोटेक्शन एक्ट भी है, अपनी प्राइवेसी का भी राइट है। उन सबको बैलेंस करते हुए क्या वो करेगा, क्योंकि जो बेसिक मुद्दा जो था वो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट है। ये तो एडिशनल पॉइंट्स भी थे। मतलब कॉन्फ्लिक्ट ऑफ इंटरेस्ट में जो मेन पॉइंट्स ये हैं कि कहाँ हमको रिक्यूज़ करना है, कैसे करना है, किन किन केसेस में करना है, तो उसमें तो कोई बहुत ज़्यादा मतलब कोई इतना वो नहीं है।
सर अभी स्पाउस ट्रेड कर सकते हैं?
अभी कर सकते हैं, हाँ, अपनी इनकम में।
इनकम से कर सकते हैं, इंडिपेंडेंटली अगर वो अर्न कर रहे हैं, डिपेंडेंट्स का नहीं है, सेल्फ सफिशिएंट है तो कर सकते हैं।
तो मैटर तो सर यहाँ इन्फॉर्मेशन करती है। मैटर तो यहाँ इन्फॉर्मेशन करती है, पैसा तो।
हाँ, तो वही इशू दोनों तरफ से है कि एक तो ये कि इनसाइडर तो आप वैसे ही ट्रीट करेंगे, तो यानी कि वो ये कह रहे हैं कि सेफगार्ड तो है ही है आपका पास पीआईटी का।
आप रिपोर्ट भी पढ़ेंगे, उसमें भी एक्नॉलेज किया गया है कि रेगुलेशंस हैं, ईएसआर जो रेगुलेशंस हैं उसके अंदर आप जिस चीज़ में डील कर रहे हैं उसमें आपकी वाइफ ट्रेड नहीं कर सकती है। लेकिन जो इन्फॉर्मेशन वो ठीक है, वो सही है कि इन्फॉर्मेशन तो आपके पास है और आपकी वाइफ के पास भी होगी या आपके हस्बैंड के पास भी होगी,
लेकिन उसके अलावा क्या आपकी वाइफ या आपका हस्बैंड अपने पैसों से कोई ट्रेड कर सकता है या नहीं? क्वेश्चन ये है।
अब उसमें ये भी है कि जैसे यदि SEC का देखा जाए रेगुलेशन, तो उसमें बहुत सारी चीज़ों में प्री अप्रूवल्स हैं कि आप प्री अप्रूवल ले सकते हैं। तो क्या वो वैसा हो सकता है क्या? क्योंकि SEC में भी ब्लैंकेट बैन नहीं है हर जगह, तो उसमें सोच समझ के करने की बात है। लेकिन इशू इम्पोर्टेंट है और उसको कैसे डील किया जाएगा वो ये विचार करने की ज़रूरत है।
सर ये दो ही कंसर्न्स हैं, ये दो ही कंसर्न्स हैं जिस पर डिस्कशन होगा। आर देयर मोर एज वेल अराउंड द हाई लेवल कमेटी रिपोर्ट्स?
नहीं, मैं अब उसमें नहीं जाऊंगा क्योंकि दोनों तरफ के हैं। हमको जो इनपुट हैं वो, क्योंकि ये पब्लिक की गई थी रिपोर्ट, तो मीडिया के भी इनपुट्स हैं, मीडिया कमेंट्रीज भी अवेलेबल हैं और इंटरनली भी उन्होंने कुछ पॉइंट रेज किए हैं। आपके पास रिपोर्ट्स भी हैं, आप उनको अच्छी तरह से पढ़ेंगे तो आपके भी कुछ और डाउट्स आ सकते हैं और आप उसमें लिख सकते हैं। तो कुछ भी करने से पहले थोड़ा सा उसको और मंथन करने।
चलो ओके कपूर साहब, भेजता हूँ मैं फिर वीर को फर्नीचर देखने।
शुरू हो गए फिर से सुबह वही पुरानी आदत, रिश्तेदारी विद बेनिफिट्स। ऑफ कोर्स,
बिना बेनिफिट के रिश्तेदार जैसे वन साइडेड प्यार। भाटिया अंकल के छोटे बेटे के दोस्त के चाचा के बड़े भाई का नंबर निकलवाया मैंने। उनका फर्नीचर का बड़ा शोरूम है।
दूर के कनेक्शन मत लगाओ, घर बैठे बैठे फर्नीचर मंगवाओ। वो कैसे? वुडन स्ट्रीट से।
You wouldn't know what woodenstreet.com.
India's finest furniture, home delivered by woodenstreet.com. Furniture bonded with love.
पापा, क्या आप अपनी जुगाड़पंती से केजू का नंबर ला सकते हैं? उस प्लान टू बिकम एन एक्टर। ओह, लव एट फर्स्ट साइट।
बेसिकली आपका अपना जून तक का डेटा था। मैं एक तो ये जानना चाहता हूँ कि क्या इस छमाई का भी नया डेटा आपके तरफ कुछ आया है? और दूसरा सर, आपका कमेंट में इस पर भी समझना चाहता था, आपने जो कंसल्टेशन पेपर की बात कही है जो आप स्टडी कर रहे हैं, वो क्या अगले तिमाही में हम एक्सपेक्ट कर सकते हैं?
इस विषय पे मेरा मुंह आज बंद है। In bringing about all this, because the process is very transparent, the consultation process and feedback and comments, and then they are to be processed and every single comment has to be looked at, and then we take a balanced view in the board. So this comprehensive review, whenever we take, it may be time intensive, but it also is very much effort intensive. So I'm glad that we have been able to successfully take up 2 such proposals in this board meeting and clear it. So the first of all is the stock brokers regulation, which is, as you know, it 1992 regulation. And so therefore it is coming after a considerable period of time with a total comprehensive review. First of all, just to give you a scale, this particular regulation was 59 pages, which is now coming to 29 pages, which is about 50%. And also in terms of words, it was about 18,846 words. It's now 9,073 words, so that's about 50%, again, reduction in words. In terms of objectives, the first one has been the streamlining the regulations to ensure that the language remains simple, enhancing the ease of understanding. So the first is simplifying language and ease of understanding. The second thing is to bring more clarity, ease of compliance, and ease of doing business. Third objective, omission of repetitive, redundant provisions and alignment with other regulations. Fourth, updating the regulations with contemporary changes. And fifth, omission of forms which may be prescribed by way of circular. So there have been several changes. Major principles of compliance requirements which have also been mentioned, which are applicable to stockbrokers, have been included in the regulations. For example, protection of clients' funds and securities, risk management and internal control, and compliance with cyber security and cyber resilience framework, etc. Around 702 comments were received on the various provisions of draft regulations, and several suggestions were also received. After taking into consideration all of that, we have been able to make these regulations. The second, maybe you may have some questions, or you would like to say what all is contained in that. But I've just given you a broad framework within which this has been attempted. The second comprehensive review has been done, that of SEBI Mutual Fund Regulations 1996. So the new SEBI Mutual Fund Regulations is also a comprehensive replacement. It's coming after many years. For nearly 3 decades, it has served as a foundational regulatory architecture, but there have been several amendments, and now we wanted to simplify and consolidate. So, in terms of again, the focus has been on simplification and consolidation, transparency and investor protection, and then we have also taken some important measures in respect of changing the caps, which is on the total expense ratio, bringing clarity on statutory levies, rationalization of brokerage limits, and disclosure of total expense ratio. There is also a reduction of about 44% from 162 pages to 88 pages. Word count has been reduced by approximately 54% of current regulation, from 67,000 words, including footnotes, to 31,000 in the new regulations. So here, important points, as you know, are the clarity on statutory levies. So expense ratio limits, now called base expense ratio, shall exclude all statutory levies. Statutory and regulatory levies such as STT or CTT, as the case may be, NGST, stamp duty, SEBI fees, exchange fees. These will be incurred for execution of trade, shall be charged on actuals over and above permissible brokerage limits. So total expense ratio will be equal to BER, which is the base expense ratio, plus brokerage, plus regulatory levies, plus statutory levies. The important objective of this exercise was to make it transparent, because the taxes and levies are subject to change over time, and they should not remain embedded in the TER. In current case, something was embedded, something was not embedded. So there was a confusion. So this confusion has been clarified. And the base expense ratio has now been adjusted. In your press release, you have the table. There were, I think you will also come to some of the points. Initially there was a proposal, and now present proposals, there has been change. The reason is that after the consultation paper, a number of representations was received from different stakeholders, and taking into consideration the balanced view has been taken in these. So, for example, the brokerage cap is now 12, which was existing is 12 bips, including statutory levies. This will now stand reduced to 6 bips, exclusive of levies. And derivative transactions, the existing is 5 bips, including statutory levies. The cap is now reduced to 2 bips, exclusive of levies. On AMC also, so far as the AUM slab-wise rates are there has also been adjustment. But broadly, we can say that The incidence remains the same, excluding and including, more or less, except for a couple of slabs. But main change is that 5 bips on exit load has been removed. The other point is the ease of compliance, rationalization of elimination of duplicate filings, digital first disclosures, streamlined borrowing framework. And this is an important point, enabling borrowing by equity-oriented index funds and equity-oriented ETFs for execution-related needs, and clarifying the permissibility of intraday borrowing mechanisms to manage redemption-related timing mismatches. This was an important point which was brought to our notice by the industry, which has been redressed. The third important point which has been taken by the board today is in respect of certain amendments, certain requirements relating to public issue to enhance ease of doing business and increase the engagement and participation of retail investors. So the first of all is that this issue of how to focus retail investors as well as the others to focus on IPO's important points. IPO documents being DRHP, being very, very big documents, it's difficult for them to focus and know. So therefore, we wanted it to bring a focus, and consultation paper was that, okay, let's have a summary, offer document summary, and then that should be highlighted. Now, the board has, of course, taken a view that instead of that, we can have similar objective fulfilled through abridged prospectus. Because abridged prospectus is also a requirement under the law, under Section 33 of the Companies Act. With application, you have to give an abridged prospectus. So this is a legal requirement, so we cannot remove abridged prospectus. So what we say is the abridged prospectus, we have now said that this will be XYZ. Like we have created all important points which are required, and we have given that format that this abridged prospectus will be containing all these important points. And this will come, today this is not being offered at the draft stage. So we are saying that the draft stage also, when you have a DRHP, at that stage also there will be a draft abridged prospectus, which exactly will bring everything together, and it will be available with a QR code, so that, and this was one of the suggestions from public feedback, so that all the public announcements related to that IPO will get that QR code, so that the people can easily access that abridged prospectus, which will now get all the information which your eyeballs need quickly. And idea is that the people are able to read through they're not able to read through the voluminous IPO thing, but still we need people who are doing a lot of research. For them, I think we need to give everything. But for the people who quickly want to really assess all the relevant information, we have indicated that it should be placed in the abridged and with a QR code, so it can be easily done. So the only change is from the document which was sent for public consultation and today is that there we wanted the summary to be highlighted and abridged to go. Here we are saying that let the abridged will be retained and it will come at the draft stage itself. And then I think in consultation with Ministry of the Corporate Affairs, we can remove change that, and offer document summary can be removed from there so that not to be repetitive. I hope it is clarified, but I will also clarify you while you are taking questions. Then the next, I think there was one more thing in this. There was a very important, enabler now to bring in an automatic lock-in for the pre-issue capital. So there are shareholders, there are promoters whose shares are locked in for 6 months, but there is also a requirement that those who are even not non-promoters, their shares also will be locked in for 6 months. The problem happens that if the things are pledged, then how the pledge will work, and that was leading to many of the companies not being able to get that clearance from those shareholders, those who have pledged it, so that these lock-in requirements could be filled up. So we are making a provisions in the changes in the ICDR, and based on that, there will be